visa to come to the United States. And nothing was coming through, and my dad was worried about running out of any extra money to get some extra foods for us. And my dad, my mom, they decided to take a chance on a visa to Brazil. Getting back to the time when we were in the German camps heading over toward the ocean, in one of the camps near the ocean there, we spent the longest time waiting for a visa to the United States. I'm going to guess that it must have been based on some quota that was established at the time, and you just had to sit and wait. My dad was a little concerned about running out of money to buy some of the extra little food items that he felt were essential, and offer for visa to accept immigrants was available from Brazil. I also know it was available from Australia, because I recollect that that third party, the third car I mentioned earlier, the couple, I think they headed to Australia on their visa. Me, my parents, and my two brothers, we chose to take a visa to Brazil. Years later, when we corresponded with the family that was in the second car with the two daughters, they waited, and about a couple of months, so to speak, later, they got a visa to the United States. Here we are, we finally get on a ship, and we're heading out to Brazil. We're in the English Channel, and I clearly remember seeing the White Cliffs of Dover. We're heading in a southerly direction. I remember crossing the tropics, getting warmer and humid, and we finally arrived in Rio de Janeiro, which in Portuguese, translated to English, means River of January, or January River. There was the first time that I saw a banana tree. Never had a banana before in my life. So here I am enjoying a banana. They took the people off the ship at an island, and you could see the Sugarloaf in the distance in Rio. We waited there probably a week or two, well treated, and ended up taking a train which took us to another immigrant camp within Brazil. That was a kind of an interesting journey. Completely new country, new scenery, warm climate. Learned about a poisonous snake. There was a woodpile near the camp, and learned that if you ever see a snake that isn't big, but it has all the colors of the rainbow, like rings, do not touch it. It's very poisonous. Well, that was a lesson well learned, and it made you very careful, because Brazil does have snakes, and they do hide in interesting places. From the immigration camp in Brazil, we finally got to move to another small town where we lived for a while. Again, I don't know the time frame. It might have been a year. And my dad worked. He got a job in a company that built modified trucks, the truck beds for special purposes. For example, making a tanker, where he got a job as a welder. He would weld steel pieces that were shaped and cut and welded together to form a tank, and then they would then install it on the chassis of a truck. We moved then from that place to a small town called Vila Galvão, near another city called Guarulhos. Again, this is all in the vicinity of the big city of São Paulo, which in English means St. Paul. There I went to school. Found out very quickly that the sport of the area, and in fact of entire Brazil, and South America for that matter. By the way, Brazil is the only country in South America and Central America that speaks Portuguese. All the other countries speak Spanish. The reason is Brazil was discovered by Portugal and occupied by Portugal. Anyway, soccer is what we call it, but I have a personal feeling that the proper name for it is futebol, which is the Brazilian way of saying soccer. Reason being, it's a ball played with your foot. And that name is retained there, and I think for a justifiable reason. As I said, foot and ball. Not our football, the American football, but that is what soccer is called in South America and Central America. I learned to play soccer. I kind of think that I got pretty good. I had good, quick feet movements. In fact, on one occasion, I happened to frustrate a guy that was an older man that was on a soccer team, and the reason I frustrated him is because he couldn't get past me. He thought he was a fancy dribbler, but my feet were so quick, I always blocked him and prevented him from scoring. We all played in bare feet. We ran everywhere in bare feet. We didn't have the money to go buy soccer shoes. In the U.S., we all accept that that's a common thing. Our parents provide us with soccer shoes. Well, a soccer shoes was a commodity. The only time you got a soccer shoe is when you were a member of a team that was playing in one city against another city. So you had to be a member of a larger team. It was fun playing soccer. That was such a neat sport that as soon as school was over, we lived our entire, what we would call summer, playing soccer. Couldn't wait to finish breakfast to run out on the field and go play soccer with all the friends. Sometimes would even forget to go home for lunch. Of course, you really get reprimanded for that. But as soon as you finish eating lunch, you ran out again, played soccer until it got semi-dark. That was not easy to miss. And then it was time for dinner. Another interesting observation is the coffee. We all enjoy coffee. I enjoy coffee, but I know about coffee being a delicacy in Brazil. And I think that there's a reason for that. The beans, coffee beans there, are allowed to ripen. It looks like a little fruit, and when it ripens, it's red. We used to go on the fields on the way to soccer, play soccer, or just going on little hikes, and pick up these little red coffee beans and chew them and spit out the coffee, the actual coffee bean itself. But the way they harvested it, they would allow it to ripen, and then they would pick them and lay them down on sacks under the sun and let them dry. Then they were delivered to stores, and I think part of the processing, the store would have a machine that would roast them. When you went in and ordered some coffee to be ground, that machine would clean that skin off, unless it was clean in between getting to the store, and I don't know that. But anyway, number of times I remember going for some coffee to a nearby store, and you could smell that aroma of coffee being roasted and ground before you ever got to the store. It was so wonderful. A cup of coffee was a treat. I lived in Brazil for 7 years, from roughly 1948 to 1955. And I actually enjoyed growing up. Looking back, I don't think as a teenager growing up in Brazil you would have gotten into any trouble, because I think primarily it was because soccer was just the absolute game. And in fact, in Brazil, it is known in Portuguese, jogo belo, which means beautiful game. And the players are so good with their moves, their footwork, their passing skills, that it irritated me when I saw them play in World Cup competition where the European countries play a aggressive type of sport, which is no longer, in my opinion, the beautiful game, in that they play it physically. When do you consider a beautiful game to be played by bumping others, by blocking them with your arms, by tripping them? Instead of playing the ball, they're playing the players. And this has ruined my enjoyment of soccer since then, because of what I saw, what soccer really was in Brazil. Truly a magnificent, beautifully choreographed sport. Some of the foods that I learned to enjoy in Brazil are very basic. The traditional meal would always have rice and beans. In Portuguese, arroz and feijão. The meal was of rice and beans was then supplemented by chicken, by beef, by fish. Speaking of fish, the very popular fish there was what is called bacalhau, which actually in U.S. we know as cod. But the way it was available in stores, they would have a barrel of it, great big long pieces of the cod, and it was salted. Reason being, the salt was a preservative. That fish would never spoil being salted, sitting outside in a container. And when you brought it home, you would put it in boiling water, and that would release the salt, so the fish wouldn't be salty, and it also made the fish swell up, and you have a nice fillet, a very tasty, very popular meal. One of the popular desserts was a piece of cheese and a kind of like a paste, which was sliced, made out of fruit. There were all kinds of varieties of fruits. They were growing wild. You would walk from home to, say, catch the bus or a train in the nearby town, and you could pick up fruit growing wild on a fence. Just unbelievable. I remember one particular fruit, and I don't remember its actual name, but it was like the size of a cherry, but it was black. Inside it was white. It had a little stone in it. The tree was huge, tall. We used to climb it and take a bag with me, a sack, and fill it up. And my mom would boil it in a big pot, and we would have an excellent tasting juice out of that. That was neat, really. Bananas, of course, were available everywhere. They used to have a market, and the market was outdoor. There was no refrigeration in the market. So if you went to the market a little later toward the end, you could buy an entire big bunch of bananas for peanuts. Now, what do you do with them? You know, you can't eat them all before they spoil, so you cooked with them. You would make all kinds of tasty desserts, cakes, whatever.